Let's get into it. Coach Colin here. Guys, sorry the episode is late today. I usually try to release around 6, 7 p.m. It was a little late because I had an episode up, and then I'm like, well, I should look into this Congresswoman that was on JRE. I'm sure there's nothing there. And boy, was I wrong. Anna, Paulina, Luna talking about UFOs, talking about the interdimensional aspect, which you guys know I love to touch on because I think that's really what's going on. Yeah, we'll get into that, but she's talking about it. She's being fully transparent, and we're going to go through it a little bit. We're going to touch on some Jacques Vallee stuff. We're going to touch on some Gary Nolan stuff, and then we're going to just analyze whether or not she is being truthful, because there is that aspect that you have to think of as well. So I'm going to play those clips after, but let's start with the Joe Rogan clip because this is wild. And honestly, I'll just say right off the bat, I mean, just let's just be clear, guys. Respectively, smoke show. Let's go back a little bit and let's start the clip. Let's go.
So I actually had, when I was stationed at Portland Air National Guard, my job there was an airfield manager. So I would interface and work a lot with the F-15 pilots at the unit. And so there had been an airspace incursion that had taken place when I was still at the time at the Guard. And I remember kind of talking to some of the pilots about it. And I was like, what was that? And they're like, we can't really talk about it. No one really wanted to address it. And so from what I'd gathered, that had been likely a UAP. And so that kind of was my perspective. Granted, I also grew up in the generation of the X-Files and, I don't know if you remember 94 Independence Day. So like for me specifically, I didn't look at it with like a crazy lens and perspective. I'm like, you never know if, we're the only ones out there essentially.
But why did you assume that if it's a top secret incursion that he couldn't talk about, that it wasn't just a military craft from another country?
Because of the way that he was discussing it.
What did he say?
So he had been, he didn't want to, from what I gather, get taken off flight status. And he's like, I really can't discuss it. We couldn't really identify it essentially, and it had outperformed them. And so that was my first, from a military perspective, kind of experience with someone who basically, there's a stigma within the flight community. Do you want to lose your security clearance? Is there this level of crazy that people kind of brand that will stick with you and kind of ruin your career?
But doesn't he have instrumentation on his jet?
Well, at the time, right? So it was an older platform, but he really didn't want to even talk about it. And I bring that up because now with our investigation and the task force that I run, actually the reason why the task force was formed was because of an event that happened at Eglin Air Force Base where both myself, Representative Matt Gaetz, and Representative Tim Burchett actually had responded and gone to investigate multiple Air Force pilots that had come forward in regards to UAP incidences that had occurred, and they were alleging that the Air Force was covering it up.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that was that, and I'm happy to go into detail on that one, but what I will tell you is the stuff that I saw at Eglin, how the military responded, me being, a former service member, and then ultimately what I saw with the pushback of the military not even wanting to share with Congress information, which is a big problem because when you have Congress that's supposed to be the advocate and voice for the American people, the oversight body, and you're being denied access, not just from a base commander, but high level up at the Pentagon, even Secretary of Defense, it's a problem.
Do you think that it's possible that these are U.S. vehicles that are top secret?
I definitely think that there's a level of advanced technology that the U.S. government has. And I think that tech can be housed within the defense contract realm. And of course, some information is going to be classified. But I can also tell you, and this might sound crazy, but based on our investigations and stuff that we've seen, okay, there is definitely something that I think would rival what we know currently with physics, and a tech that potentially is out there that we don't have the ability to reproduce, because it would basically be like dropping a cell phone right off back during the time of maybe the caveman. So we just don't have the tech to develop it yet. What I can also tell you is based on our interviews, and this has been something that you can go back and watch with the congressional hearings, but I was actually able to ask some of the witnesses, what are these things? And they keep saying interdimensional. And then when you talk about the interdimensional aspect of, are these things pre-existing, maybe outside of what we currently know as our own dimension, that stuff can kind of all sound crazy. But at the end of the day, my job as an investigator is to receive all the information, decipher it, and then ultimately from a congressional aspect, if you do have contractors that are withholding information or operating outside of the purview of the federal government, I mean, there's budgetary issues, but there's definitely something that I can tell you with confidence that exists that we don't know how to explain currently.
So when you say that it operates outside our understanding of physics, what specifically are you saying? What happened?
To I guess break it down in simple terms is that I think that some of the tech that exists, that whatever these things have, these energy things have.
Energy things? What do you mean?
Well, they call them interdimensional beings. I think that they can actually operate through the time spaces that we currently have. And that's not something that I came up with on my own. That's based on stuff that we've seen. That's based on information that we've been told. And then also, too, I think that there's this historical aspect of, this gets into the deeper theories and concepts of religion, and I think the history that we currently know, and that kind of spins off into another topic of, you have the modern day Bible, you have this aspect of Bibles or books of the Bible that have been removed that explain and kind of touch on these topics. And I think that we're in a time and age where you have such a vast amount of information that we have access to via social media, via your cell phone, via the internet. And so it's really changing the way that we understand, the origins of life and the spiritual reality that we know.
When you
currently.
say interdimensional beings, that they know that these are interdimensional beings, how do they know that?
Based on testimony, would be based on witnesses that have come forward. But what I can tell you
So the
is
witnesses just were told that they were
no,
interdimensional?
that they've seen things. And what I can tell you without getting into classified conversations is that there have been incidences that I believe where very credible people have reported that there have been movement outside of time and space.
That's very vague.
Yeah. So look.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Look. Have I seen a portal open? No. Have I?
How would they know that they're witnessing something that's moving through time and space? That's what I wonder when she says that. And then she brings up portals right now. But how would anybody? How would you and I watching something, if we watch something disappear, we might think it's moving really fast. We might think it's moving through time and space, but I would love to know what that actually means. I kind of get it because you know me, I'm going to bring it to angels and demons. I'm going to bring it to the occult. I'm going to bring it to that whole world of things. I get it within that realm, but she's trying to speak through a more polished politician scientific type of lens. I'd love to understand that more. Let me just go back. Let's go.
Where very credible people have reported that there have been movement outside of time and space.
That's very vague.
Yeah. So look.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. Look. Have I seen a portal open? No. Have I seen a spaceship? Personally, no. Have I seen evidence of this? Yes. Have I seen photo documentation of aircraft that I believe were not made by mankind? Yes. Is there historical significance to this? Yes. Is there multiple events that go back to, I would argue, maybe even before the time of Christ that have documented this in text? Yes. So do I believe that the government has access to certain technology? Yes, to an extent. And I believe that certain contractors potentially have back engineered this tech. I think that that's what can explain the advancements that we're seeing. But I also believe that this is a dangerous level of hidden information from the American people, because if you have an aspect of the federal government, which I can tell you, I, with two other members of Congress, were denied access to information at Eglin Air Force Base pertaining to whistleblowers because of the fact, and we can get into that story and what happened at Eglin in a second, but we were denied access and told that we don't have security clearance or the read-in authority on a special access program. That's a problem because I'm supposed to represent and be an investigative body, and you have then people who are unelected that are operating basically in secrecy, and that's a problem. That's a big problem.
And so how do these people have the authority to do that?
I think it's been decades of classified secret information, then also this aspect of the intelligence community that's been empowered. And it's kind of serendipitous with timing because when you talk about the intelligence communities and what they've done essentially to the trust in this country with the American people, I think this goes all the way back even into JFK, with how they basically have operated outside of the purview of Congress and basically to an extent have gone rogue up until recently. You're seeing a big push and pull to try to rein in these intelligence agencies currently.
Yeah. So what I want to bring it back to evidence. You said that you've seen evidence. Like what kind of evidence have you seen?
I have seen photos. I have seen...
what have you seen photos of?
So I was in a skiff, and I can't discuss all that was in a skiff, but what I can tell you is based on the photos that I've seen, I'm very confident that there's things out there that have not been created by mankind.
It seems crazy that people have access to information that shows that there's something outside of us that is more intelligent, at least more capable than we are, and they hide it from everybody else.
What I can tell you is that when you have thousands upon thousands of people around the planet throughout time that have reported something,
Right.
to say that those people are crazy, to say that, you know, the whole concept of even just asking the question that you might not necessarily be psychologically sound, that in itself, you know, that's a disinformation campaign to
Yes.
get people to shut up about it. And that's a problem. We know that the U.S. government has not exactly been clean in a lot of what they've done with the American people, specifically to the topic of UFOs.
Which makes you think that
That's interesting because she's a part of the government. You know, you can't lose sight of that. Listen, I already said, respectively, smoke show, but you can't lose sight of that. She's a part of it. And she's talking about like people in the military who are operating in secret. But then when she's asked about what she saw, she starts to operate in secret. You know what I mean? So it's like, what is the use of us as people backing these congressmen and senators in finding out this information? Because once they find it out, they're just going to keep it secret as well. So when she talks about reeling these people in who are doing that, reeling them in what way? Reeling them in the sense of they're going to show all of us everything that's going on? I don't think so. I think it's going to be a reeling in of, now that we know this exists, how can we use it? You know, what money could be made? You know, we're tired. Insider trading's going away. We want our cut of this. Give me money. Give me money. Lindsey Graham's back there itching for a couple $100 bills. He says, I need alien money. Is there alien? Do y'all have alien currency? What does it convert to? I need money. Papa just need $4 billion. That's all Papa need. Papa just need $4 billion. Can I have it? You know what I mean? I don't know. It's very odd. It's very, very odd. Every time I love doing a Lindsey Graham impression. I might do a whole episode just as Lindsey Graham. But yeah, let's keep going.
which makes you think that it's probably because there's something there. If you think about the motivation they had with Project Blue Book, when J. Allen Hynek was running Project Blue Book, this specific intention was to discredit all stories.
And he ended up ultimately, though, after all of his investigations, becoming someone that was like, I think there's something here. But that's true. By the way, a lot of people might not necessarily go onto Google and look up that information, but you can actually look up the declassified reports from Project Blue Book. What's also interesting, though, is when we're talking about tech, right, the ability for this tech, being that it exists, to change dependence for entire governments on things like fossil fuel, et cetera. You know, it's look, I think everyone has a moral obligation to do what they think is right. Okay. And so if you're in a position of power and you see something wrong and you're not addressing it, I think, you know, this in itself, getting the truth out there for people to decide for themselves. I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm just telling you in our investigations and what we are pushing for in regard to transparency. I would like to see the federal government roll out some of the stuff that we've been given access to, because I think that that information belongs in the hands of the American people.
What would be the rationale for keeping a photograph of a known absolute not of this world craft from the American people or from the world? Why would anybody think that that would be the smart thing to do, is to limit the access of that information to a very small amount of people?
I think that part of the fear is that you have advisors that think that, you know, the American people or humanity might not be able to handle it. There's this like protective complex, but then also too, I think when you are talking about these things, for a lot of people, I think that it kind of can rock your world a little bit in regards to where you stand in a faith perspective, and then also too, an act.
Not at all. Not at all. Everybody who has faith, the you know, Islam, they got the jinns that they talk about. Christianity has demons. Judaism also has demons. Buddhism even talks about demons. You're not saying all this is just surrounded by demons, but it's like, have you read scripture? This is not going to listen. How many billions of people follow a religion or are faithful to a religion? This is not going to rock anybody's world. It's going to make a lot of people go, I knew it. I knew it. Now, how do they operate? I want to know. It'll do that, but I don't think it'll shatter most people. You know, I often say, I believe that Jesus died and then was alive again 3 days later. I believe that. It's going to be hard for you to rock my world on some things. I'm real open. I'm real open to things. I don't know about everybody else. I'm just saying. It's going to be hard to rock people's world, say that people can't handle it. I think that's just always a scapegoat that people use, that they just can't handle it. Now, if we just get into what she said, again, I don't know what this is going to do. You know, her and her team finding things out. You know, is she going to bring all of that to us to do the right thing? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think they'll just go, oh, that's why you didn't want to tell us. And that's why we can't tell the American people? Okay, we won't. Okay, we'll just tell them it was a hoax. Okay? All right, no problem. That's it. That's how I see it playing out, quite honestly. I mean, you know, not to be cynical, I don't think they're going to bring that to everybody. And then when she says Gates, Tim Burchett, who's a very honest guy who's talked about this stuff on Sean Ryan's podcast quite a bit, and then herself, they were the ones that went and saw some stuff. I find that very interesting just because Matt Gaetz is no longer a congressman. So he just has that information as a guy. That's interesting that he hasn't said anything. Let's move on to Through Time and Space. We already touched on that. And then that she's seen photos. I don't know what photos she could have seen. They have to be high res. They have to be very, very, very clear and not what we've all seen, which is just little smidges on little bits of screen, little smidgens, and then they disappear or they go up or they go into water. You know, I mean, the high advanced ones, you know, you see one go into water, you're like, whoa, I've seen some stuff. But most of the time, it's just something in the sky and it's just there. And then the video ends because the videos are always 10 seconds long. No one ever takes a 15-minute video. Let me tell you something. If I see something, I'm taking an hour-long video. It's going to be a podcast of just me going, what is that? What is that? It's just going to be an hour of that. Of course, I'm going to do that. And if it moves, I'm going to run and follow it. Why is no one doing that? It's just me? I'm the only one with that plan? Come on, guys. Let's all have that plan together. Let's move on to and you know what else I'll say? I think it's really funny that if you talk about interdimensional now, this has just happened now. If you talk about interdimensional, you're smart. If you talk about angels and demons, you're crazy. And if you talk about the simulation, you're a scientist. Isn't that funny? Isn't that funny how that works? But yet they're all basically the same thing, right? We talk about the simulation. It's basically another dimension. You're in one dimension. There's another dimension outside of here. You talk about angels and demons. They flow in and out of our dimensions with good intentions and bad intentions. And where they are, we could also transcend to via our soul, right? But for some reason, to bring that notion up is absolutely crazy. And now all of a sudden, when you bring up interdimensional, now that's a good thing. Before, that was pure tinfoil. It was pure tinfoil. But now, all of a sudden, congressmen are saying it. And, you know, that brings me to something I'll talk about after this clip, which is, you know, how truthful do you think she's being with all this? Because there is the aspect of she is just on Joe Rogan's podcast, you know, just selling him some BS. Joe Rogan said that he's felt it before with people. He hasn't called them out by name, but I can gather who it probably is. And he knows when people are BSing him for the most part. Unless you're Terrence Howard, then he's just completely enamored by you. He's just like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. But I don't know. Is she being truthful? I mean, she's a congresswoman. And the first thing she does, and pretty much it's like a stream throughout the whole podcast, is talk about UFOs, interdimensional beings. That's the first thing that's on her mind. That's so odd to me, you know? I don't know. 2025 is crazy. But let's jump into this. This is Jesse Michaels sitting with Jacques Vallee, and they're talking about interdimensional beings. Let's keep going.
Is it good or bad? Because, you know, I think of the hierophanies that Diana Pasulka writes about, where somebody can have a beautiful religious conversion experience that seems positive, and then in other cases they feel like kind of demonic tricksters giving you false information. So,
from what I've read, people perceive it as bad. They want to be rid of it, and we certainly hear that from current witnesses who had no idea that this was possibly going to happen. They are bothered by things in their home, including things that cause trouble.
One of my all-time favorite Jacques Vallee books is his 1969 classic, Passport to Magonia. In it, he basically moves away from the theory that UFOs are aliens from outer space, and instead proposes that we are interacting with interdimensional beings that have been with humanity for thousands of years.
I had always wanted to look at where did these stories, fairy tales, whatever, that we tell to little children, where did they come from? All the books about different civilizations in the Pacific, in Siberia and so on, have footnotes. They say, by the way, the shaman also told me 50 years ago, there were little men who came out of a big light, in Nivgorod.
Right. I mean, you could take the stance that Roswell or Trinity was this very strong kind of demarcation line, or you could assume that we've been seeing these things for thousands of years.
Which Jacques Vallee, of course, would
Yes.
say. Yes.
And would you disagree with that, or?
No, I absolutely agree.
Maybe these non-human entities have been using tactics like B.F. Skinner's intermittent reinforcement, confusion, deception, and absurdity to drive human historical narrative for thousands of years. And maybe Celtic leprechauns in medieval Ireland, angels and demons in the Bible, and what we now call space aliens are all just the same thing. It feels like
Very interesting stuff. Maybe they are all the same thing. I actually think that they are definitely the same thing. And I don't think that the people of, whatever you call biblical times back in the day, decades, hundreds, thousands of years ago, I don't think they were confused. We often have this mindset that the people of those times were dumb and they couldn't think properly and they didn't understand. And that's why they thought it was angels and demons. You understand? They just didn't get it. And we're so much smarter. We are so much smarter. That's why we wear Crocs. We're so much smarter than these people. And we understand what this is now. It's like, I don't know. I think there's an aspect of being too smart for your own good. I say this to my friends all the time. When you overthink something, when you know something so well, like let's say you understand fitness really well. You understand diet, health really, really well. You understand it like a PhD. So you start to trick yourself with your own knowledge. You go, well, carbs are made up of this and protein's made up of that. So in actuality, when I burn this off, so it actually wouldn't be that bad if I just got a Big Mac and put a slice of pizza inside of it, because that would hit all the macros. Macros are fine. If I sleep for 8 hours, I burn this many calories. So this is actually a good thing I'm doing. You know what I mean? You can trick yourself when you have an abundance of information, right? Just because you have an abundance of information or knowledge, it doesn't mean that you're coming to great conclusions or the right conclusions. You know what I mean? I feel like that's where we are with this whole thing when it comes to these interdimensional beings. I think we're doing ourselves such a disservice by thinking that the people who were strong enough and smart enough to get us to this point were somehow dumb. We're somehow not smart. We're savages. Primitive. That's the word that's always out there. Primitive. I think we underestimate the technology they had. I think we underestimate the knowledge that they had. I think we underestimate their minds and their bodies and what their minds were capable of. I think we underestimate all of it. And it's this wild hubris that we have, that we are the ones we've never been to this stage of technology ever. There's never been anything like this in our time. I think we're wrong about that. Honestly, I really do. But interdimensional, let's jump into, and I really got to find out more. I know you guys want to hear more about Jacques Vallee and what he has to say about this. I have to read his books. I have to go through the Rogan episode that he did. I have to go through all of that because I used to pay him no mind. But now that I'm really into all of this and I'm going deep, I know I have to search more into him and what he has to say. I think you guys may have heard it. Maybe it was just in my research. But when Diana Pasolka, when she was with him in his house, he pulled out a book that was 666 pages. And it was about the devil. And he turned to her and said, if you want to understand what's going on with all of these UAPs and UFOs, you have to read this book. It was a book about the devil and demons, which I found very, very interesting. So I got to find out about that. I got to find out what that means, what that book's about. I don't know if I actually want to touch it or read it, but let's move on. Gary Nolan here talking about his experiences.
You shared them with Ross Coulthard on the interview with him. And one of those experiences that you, as a kid, you saw entities in your room for a period of days or weeks. I'm not sure if I remember correctly.
Weeks, a few weeks.
And they were there. They were real for you.
Mhm.
That's what you explained. That experience or that set of experiences, that is still fuel for you.
Oh yeah, it's like I can still see it in my mind. And so, look, somebody could claim it was some sort of weird dream.
Sure.
Fine. Well, why did I have that weird dream that other people have had
Mm-hmm.
and relayed the thing? And it wasn't until literally 20 years later that I came upon the explanation for what it was, even though it had always been in my mind, from the year 10 on, it was never anything that I really ever thought about.
Sure.
And so I didn't have bad dreams, but what I did have, though, is a burning need whenever I moved into a new house to put shades on the windows. I had a sort of a PTSD about it because I did have memories of something looking in the window at me. And so, and actually, funny enough, Diana relays an event like that in her book when she and I and Taylor, she called him, went out to that place in New Mexico where they put me in a room. We first got to this little kind of bed and breakfast that had no shades on the window, and I just had a meltdown. I didn't know that she was there, but apparently she was sitting in a little side room when I came out to the front desk and said, I can't be in this room.
Wow.
I need a room with shades on it. Now, it's just a PTSD, and somebody could say, just because Gary had bad dreams when he was a kid. That's it. Fine. Maybe that's it. But it's those kinds of things that, again, it's like, how do I explain that? And how do I turn it into science so that I can have a conversation with my peers about it?
So how do you
I feel like that's always the issue. How do I turn it into science? It's like I really feel like people have to start, at least people in this community, they have to start embracing the supernatural because that's all they're covering. It's almost like the scientists of today don't know how much they mirror occultists of the past and the things that they do, the experiences that they have, and that they keep trying to bring it down to ones and zeros and logic, because that's the only way he can talk to his peers. It's like whereas if he just moves into a different section of people, he can talk to them about it all day. He could go and talk to a bunch of occultists about this. They'd be like, oh, okay, I think I understand that. He could go and talk to a bunch of people he could talk to me about this. He wouldn't have to turn it into science for me at all. You can go and talk. He could go talk to a bunch of Christian people and they'd be like, oh, okay, I understand completely. Why do you have to turn it into science? Because what he actually has to do is take away the supernatural aspect in order for his peers to believe him. But the supernatural aspect might be the explaining factor that he needs in order to really understand what happened. Anyway, let's keep going.
explain that particular series of episodes there when you were small?
That's actually the only way I explain that is by explaining all the other things first. Because it's just too weird to me. It's just like, I don't have an understanding of why things like that would show up in little boys' bedrooms. Sounds creepy to me.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, sure. And that, of course, explains PTSD. As a kid, and I don't think I was any different than anybody else, I was always spooked out by being followed up the stairs or followed down my hallway at night. I, just run
Mhm.
right into bed, and I wouldn't think about things that would creep me out. But if I did think about things, I did imagine things, I would feel like I would create them and they would
Mhm.
appear. I mean,
Right.
that's,
Or you, yeah.
so you said at a conference, the SALT conference, which I thought was curious, because it was a more an investment centric type conference in New York. But it felt like the crowd there was very eager to hear about uh, your experiences and your thoughts on this kind of subject. And at one point, you said, I'm just going to read it out for a second here. You said,
Mhm.
when the host asked you, "What is it? What's happening?" and you said, "I think that it is an advanced form of intelligence, something that we don't understand, that is using some sort of intermediaries that are put here." I think you said here, as an intelligence test. So can
Mhm.
you see what's in front of you for what it really is?
Right.
Uh,
And what it
Elaborate.
really is means what's behind it. That the intermediaries in this hypothesis, in this speculation,
Mhm.
are something that sort of a minimal viable product of what it is that you can interact with, and realize that it's not human. Realize that it is evidence of something that is not you. Evidence that it is something of a profound something behind the scenes. But taking on what Jacques Vallee would say, because I remember reading his books before I'd ever met him. Jacques uses the word absurd a lot in his discussion of people's experiences and things that they've seen. And, example is, it's absurd that a flying saucer lands in a field. Some guy gets out in a silver suit and then proceeds to fix it as if it's, a car. Opens the side panel and, twiddles with it, and then gets in and flies off. And so it's absurd. It's absurd that sometimes documents walk up to the door of the farmer and say, "Can I have a glass of water?"
Sure.
And so what his interpretation, and he's just brilliant, is, look, this is a show. This is meant to make you think and realize that it's absurd. And are you capable of realizing that it's not at face, what you're seeing is not at face value. What you're seeing is something which is meant to stimulate you to realize what's really going on, or what might be going on behind the scenes.
That's very interesting. That's an interesting thought. And it's also, funny enough, it is kind of, I'm not going to say biblical or anything like that, but when you do talk about the universe or God, there is that type of tests going on all the time, right? You ask for patience, and then somebody is very annoying in front of you. And do you have what it takes to remember, I asked for this? This is the opportunity. This is the test. This is what will give me patience. Okay. And then you handle it properly, right? You ask for strength. You ask for clarity. You ask for certain things in life when you're looking up to the heavens, usually when you're really mad, you're angry. You're like, I just need. And then all of a sudden you get the opportunity. Are you in tune enough to see that this is exactly what you asked for, even when it's not in the package that you requested or that you would want? It's not in an easily unwrapped bow type package. It's annoying. It's annoying. It's hard to figure out. It's like a puzzle. It's like a Rubik's Cube at the top, and then that opens up, and then the bow is not a bow. It's like a knot that you've never seen before, and you have to undo it. Yeah, I guess that would be a thing. Again, I have to read more of what Jacques is talking about. I have to read these books that this gentleman is actually referencing. But, it is sad at the same time to watch this clip and to watch this guy who, in my mind, had a very supernatural encounter. If you don't know, he had basically beings show up in his room, very traumatizing for him, felt people were watching him through the windows. And this happened for weeks over and over. And they were as real as anything. They're as real as anything. They weren't hazy. They weren't fading in and out. It wasn't like he'd rub his eyes and they were gone. They were very, very real. And, if you have to explain that, it's hard in the scientific community, There's so many other communities where you're fine explaining something like that, but he has to make sure to let people know, no, I don't think it was this. I actually think it was like he has to go through all these mental gymnastics in order to still be accepted by the group. Because if he goes too far off what the group finds acceptable, all of a sudden he cannot reside in that group anymore. I hate that. I'm really trying not to be that way. I'm trying to be really open. This is someone named, let me subscribe, something named Christina Gomez. I'm going to try and get her on the show as well. I want to have a conversation with her about what she's covering in this one, but she's also talking about some Jacques Vallee stuff here, and I just wanted to play this clip really quick.
In the middle of the night, there was such a bright light that woke her up, and there were no curtains anymore. There was nothing on the windows. There was a light that brightened up the whole forest. It was intense white, tending to the ultraviolet. And she saw this and then told me about it. And it was like something very much alive saying goodbye. And that, there is a sense of humor in all the manifestations of UFOs, a sense of humor at a level which is difficult for us to accept.
The timing was too perfect to be a coincidence. Nothing for years. Then this spectacular light display on the final night, as if the phenomenon was kind of winking at him. And this aligns with patterns noted by other researchers. The phenomenon seems to avoid scientific documentation while maintaining just enough presence to continue the mystery. And Vallee spent 6 decades studying UFOs and reached a revolutionary conclusion. We're not dealing with visitors from space, but with something far more complex, a control system that's been shaping humanity's consciousness throughout history. Whether this system is trying to guide our evolution, test our responses, or simply maintain its own hidden existence remains very unclear. But Vallee's research suggests our survival may depend on learning to communicate with it intelligently. The massive database his team built could have provided answers, but instead it disappeared into the classified world, and we're left with congressional hearings that treat symptoms rather than causes. Do you think Vallee's control system hypothesis explains UFO behavior better than the ET hypothesis? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.
Control system, that's actually an interesting thought process as well. And again, it does touch on a higher intelligence forming everything, because what she just explained in very technical terms was something that's all knowing, that's always present, and that nudges all the people in the world towards their callings and things that they should do and lessons they need to learn. Well, what does that sound like? And then also it's like you take that control system whole analogy, and then you put that towards simulation theory, and that makes perfect sense as well. And then you also take that and you put that onto interdimensional beings that are moving in and out of our realm, our dimension, and it fits there too. So it seems like that's where he's going with it. I'm trying to just make these connections as we do these episodes together. I'm glad you guys are really feeling the new direction that I'm taking. It's not going to be always, if another person pops up out of nowhere and they're like, I'm running for president. I'm going to be on it. Believe you me, I'm going to be on it. I'm just saying, if there's another person that pops up like that, I won't be silent about it. I'll tell you that much. But right now it's like, I really like the direction I'm going in. It feels really good. But what do you guys think about this whole thing? I think the whole interdimensional thing makes a lot of sense. And also going back to what I said about Paulina when I was questioning her, let's not have it frozen there. Okay, there you go. When I was questioning whether or not she was, being truthful, right? I feel like when people bring up I've said this before, when people bring up the interdimensional aspect of all this, I feel like they become more, in my world, they become more trustworthy. Because when you bring that up, you are moving, you are shifting away from the narrative that has been being built since the 1940s. You're completely shifting away from that, because you really, hard to have an alien invasion the way that it's been talked about for so long, when all of a sudden it becomes interdimensional beings. And some of them are good, some of them are bad. And they've been here forever. Once you have that narrative out there, it completely does not help the alien from a far galaxy narrative, and they're here to help or they're here to not help, and you must give us all the power because now they're here and you need us now and we all have to band together, we're one world here. It takes away from that narrative a lot. So I tend to believe what she's talking about, but just the fact that they can't come forward. But I also don't really trust the whole, well, these people, they're the ones being so secretive. And if we could just get that information, well, then we'll just do the right thing with that information because we have to. Because again, Joe Rogan's like, okay, what did you see? And she's like, oh, I was in a skiff, so I can't talk about it. They show everything that they can't talk about. They're shown in the skiff. The skiff is basically just a meeting room. It's like pencils up. Pencils up means, you're not writing anything down. You're not recording anything. You're just being told information so you have an understanding. When it came to the drone situation, all the Congress people, all the senators, they were brought into a skiff. They can't talk about what they heard in the skiff. So everything that they'll be told about will always be in the skiff, and they won't be legally allowed to say anything. That's why they do it in the skiff. So I don't know. But I do wholly believe that these things are interdimensional. And I think that there is a direct link with these UFOs, angels and demons. I think there's a direct link. And I think it's not the people of, thousands of years ago that are confused. I think that we're confused. And I think it's being done intentionally. Anyways, guys, I'm out of here.